Hey everyone, it's Dina. I'm here today with a bead weaving tutorial. Today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to do the Russian spiral stitch and make a nice little bracelet. So I've already got part of the bracelet already completed, so I'll show you how to do the stitch first. Then we'll come back and I'll show you how to do some netting stitches here on either end of the bracelet to make it a little bit longer if you're needing it, and then after that we'll attach our clasp. So meet me back in just a second and we'll go through the supplies that you need for this. So the supplies that we're going to need for this bracelet are going to be the gemstones found from the Bargain Bead Box's April collection of 2025 called April Showers. These are the Malaysia jade or the dyed quartz. They're in a color of sky blue and they're 4 millimeters. So if you don't have this specific bead right here, you can always use any type of 4 millimeter bead if you like. We're also going to need 2 different colors of 8/0 seed beads. I'm using the Miyuki manufacturer today. This is just in the crystal color and this is in the Capri blue color. The crystal color's Miyuki number is 131 if you're interested in that. And the Capri blue color is 149. You're also going to need some 15/0 seed beads, also Miyuki today. These are in the Labrador full color, and that Miyuki number is 55006. And then to top it all off, you'll need some sort of a clasp. I am using a clasp that I have from my stash. I'm pretty sure I got this from Hobby Lobby, actually, from my local Hobby Lobby a couple years ago, but it's a pretty strong magnet. And with this being this type of a bracelet, it's going to need to have some sort of a strong magnet because you're going to need that type of structure to be able to hold together this type of a bracelet and everything. So if you have a nice strong magnet, then this would be a good project to use one of those. If you don't, then just any other type of magnet or any other type of clasp that you prefer would work just as well. You're also going to need some thread and needle. So I have my typical pony size brand needle and I have a size 11 on my thread right now. And then I'm just using dragon thread size 8. I am using the crystal color, so that way when I'm going through the crystal beads, you don't see the thread as often. So those are the supplies that you're going to need. And meet me back, and then I will show you the first steps on how to do the Russian spiral stitch. Alrighty, so to start off with, what we want to think about this stitch is you want to think of this in groups of 3. So we're going to add a series of beads, but it's always going to be in groups of 3. So the first grouping is going to be an 8/0 and then 2 15s. Then we're going to go to our second 8/0 color, pick up 2 15s after that. Then we'll pick up our first of our 4 millimeter gemstones. And then 2 15s after that. So you always want to make sure that you have 2 15s after whichever bead that you pick up, either the 8/0 or the gemstone. I'll probably just say the gemstone. Bring that down to the end of the thread, and I'm going to go ahead and just tie a knot right here. So I'm going to make a loop and put my short end through that loop away from me, then turn it around, make it another loop, and then put that short loop through the loop going towards me. And then just do this ever so slowly because sometimes you can wrap around a bead, so you got to do it slowly enough, and then tie yourself a little knot. And my camera's having issues focusing today. See if I can get it to focus a little bit better here. There, that's a little bit better, I think. Alright, so that first bead that we added was the Capri color, the blue seed bead. So to start off the stitch, we're going to just go ahead and pass through that first grouping. So the first, man, it's not focusing. Come on, dude. You gotta focus. There we go, I think. Alright, so we're going to go through that first of the beads that we added. So the 8/0 plus the 2 15s. And then that just kind of gets us away from the knot itself. So to actually start the stitch, we're going to go through the 8/0 and the first 15 that's next in line, which is the crystal, and then the first 15. Now we're going to add our groups of 3 again. So what do you know, or how do you figure out which bead to add next? Well, you go by the bead that you're about to go into. So the stitch itself is that you go through either your 8 or your 4mm, and then also that first 15 just after that. So we're going into the 4mm, so that'll be the first bead that we pick up. So pick up your 4mm bead. Well, if I can find one with the hole. And then after that, there's one. Pick up 2 15s. So always pick up 2 15s after whichever bead that you pick up. Now remember, we're coming out of that first 15-0 right after the crystal seed bead. So we're coming out of that first 15-0. We're going to skip that next 15-0 and then go through the 4mm in line, as well as, if you can get onto it, the seed bead just after that. So just the first 15 is all you want to go through. And then when you pull this down, you're going to see a little bit of thread, and your bead may sit a little wonky like that. If that happens, then just play with the bead a little bit to where the bead sits in that fashion. And then when you pull on the thread, then you're not going to see as much of the thread on the bead. So we need to add our second bead of the 3, the set of 3. And the next one that we're going to go through is going to be the Capri blue color. So pick up a Capri blue and then 2 15s. We're going to skip over that next 15 in line, go straight through the Capri blue and the next 15. Just like that. And when you pull that down, that's going to sit the beads off to the side like that. Now the beads are going to sit kind of wonky this first couple of rows, but usually after row 3 is when it's going to start coming all together. So now we need to go through our third one. So pick up our crystal 8-0 plus our 2 seed beads, 15s. We're skipping that second 15 in line, go straight through the 8-0 and then that first 15 again. So now that completes our first rotation, and it should look something similar to that. So now we need to do what's called stepping up. When you step up, that means that you're moving from the current row up a bead, so that way you can get set up for the next row. So we're not adding any beads this time, we're just going to go directly through the 4mm crystal, and don't forget to come out of that first 15. When you come out the first 15, now you're set up to be able to do that second row. And then also, how do you figure out which rows are which? So your first row is your crystal bead right here, your gemstone right here, and your Capri color bead right here. That's your first little triangle. The ones that are out on the edge are your second row. So the outer edge ones are the ones that we're going to go through first. I think my camera is focusing on the beads. I'm going to move some of these guys out of the way. See if that helps any. That might help some. I may have to move these out of the way too. Okay, that might help a little bit better. Alright, so that's your first 3. You've got your Capri blue here, your crystal right here, and then your gemstone. So we're coming out of the 15 after the last row of the gemstones that we added. When you look at everything in line, the next bead that we're actually going to go through is this Capri blue bead right here. So with that being the case, you pick up a Capri 8-0 plus 2 of your 15s, and you go through that bead, and if you can catch on to it, go ahead and catch on to the 15 just after that. And then when you pull this tight, it starts to get everything to kind of cup up a little bit, and then that starts your tube looking of the stitch. So now Our next bead that we're going to go through is the crystal bead. So pick up a crystal 8/0 plus 2 15s. We're coming out of that first 15. We're going to go over to the crystal 8/0 sticking out. And if you can catch on to it, go through the 15/0 right afterwards. Now our last one is going to be our gemstone. So we're going to pick up a gemstone plus 2 15s. And we're going to go through that gemstone. And this is usually, I have problems to where I can't get to that first 15, which is fine. You just go through the gemstone. Just don't forget to come back and go through the 15. And adjust your gemstone that you just added if you need to. So I'm finishing out this row right now and going through the 15/0 that's sitting there. So now we need to step up because we added 3 beads already, and the way that I know that we need to step up is that I am directly next to an 8/0 sitting right here. If I was not directly next to an 8/0, then that's how the difference to know if you need to step up or not. So I'm going to go through that Capri Blue 8/0 plus the 15 and then come out of that. And see the difference that we came out of that 15. Well, there's a 15 sitting right next to it, not an 8/0. So that's how the difference is to know if you need to step up on the next round or not. So our next bead to add is going to be the crystal. So crystal in 2 15s. And then we go through the 8 in the first 15. Our next one is our gemstone, and then 2 15s. Go through the gemstone in the first 15 after that. And then adjust your gemstone if you need to. And then our last bead to add is going to be the Capri Blue 8/0 plus 2 15s. Go through the Capri Blue and the first 15, and look how we're going to be sitting right next to that crystal 8/0 again. So that tells you it's time to step up. So I'll do this one more time, and then I'll break off and allow you to finish off the stitch for as long as you want. So my first one on this one is going to be a gemstone and then 2 15s. In each row you're going to end up starting off with a different bead. Then go through the gemstone in that first 15. And then pulling down tight. Next one is the Capri Blue, and then 2 15s. Going to go through the Capri Blue that's sitting there, plus the 15 right after that. So you pick up 2 15s, but go through just one in the grouping. And then my last one is going to be the crystal with the 2 15s, then go through the next crystal and that 1 15. And now we're sitting right next to our gemstone. So now it's time to step up. And that's how you know it's time to do that. So now you can actually already see that we're already starting to make a little bit of a tube. So that's the Russian spiral stitch. So go ahead and continue this on. I'm going to use the whole strand that came in the Bargain Bead Boxes kit, which I think was it's 14 inches of these 4mm beads. So quite a bit of beads, but I am going to use the whole strand. And this is all I have left are these 9 beads sitting here that I have not added to this guy. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to add in those last 9 beads. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you how to do a netting stitch on either side and show you how to measure how much of that netting stitch to do on either side to get the size bracelet that you need. So meet me back in just a moment. For me, it'll be a couple of minutes so I can get these last couple of beads on, and I will show you that part, the netting part. Alright, so now I have all of my beads added on, and I've already gone ahead and added a couple of rows of the netting type stitch that I'm going to show you how to do on this end already, just to kind of get a gauge of what I need as far as length for my bracelet. So to gauge how much of that length of your bracelet you're going to need, this is how I did it. Now I'm using the front of my wrist because I have a nice little freckle sitting right there. So I'm going to put the middle of my clasp right in line with that freckle. Kind of get an idea of where that clasp, you know, how much room that clasp is using up on my wrist. And then also you want to see how much of that clasp is sticking out from your wrist. And notice that the loop of the magnet clasp is sitting right there in the center, but it's sitting right up against my wrist. Well, I'm going to want this a little bit looser than that, so I'm going to need it about out in here somewhere. So that's what I'm going to kind of gauge as far as the length of the bracelet, how much more length of the bracelet to get in order to get my clasp to be able to sit off of my wrist a little bit like that to make it more comfortable as far as wearing. Now I'm going to go ahead and use some wire guards. I did not say that in the front in the beginning, but I'm going to go ahead and use some wire guards today, so I'll put that down in the description box as well. So if you have any wire guards, then you can use that. If not, you can always just go through the ends of your whichever clasp that you want to use a couple of times with your thread and everything. That's perfectly fine to do too. When I use wire guards, I go ahead and use a jump ring to attach to my magnetic clasp. I'm doing that just to make it a little bit more easier, that when you're trying to get your clasp off and you pull apart like this, I had to use my nails to get it undone, but sometimes it's harder to get it apart that way. And I don't want to be pulling too much on the thread of the bracelet. I'd rather be pulling more on jump rings and things like that. Jump rings are much easier to replace than potential beads that might be falling off because your thread may break because you're pulling on it too much. So a lot of people pull their magnets off just like that. I try to slide mine across like this, unless it has it's one of those type of magnets that may have a little clip on the inside to keep that from happening. But I try to slide mine off just like that whenever I can. Just easier for me to get it on and off. So that's how I kind of gauge how much that I'm going to be needing. So to get the actual amount, now remember the middle of my clasp is right where my freckle is right here. So I just lay my bracelet down on the mat and then wrap the bracelet around my wrist and say, okay, for a tight fit, this is where this end of the bracelet's sitting. And for this end of the bracelet, it's sitting like that. And that's for a tight fit. Now remember, I want my bracelet to be much looser than that, so I'm going to kind of gauge it as far as looseness. Now see, I have it loose on the bottom end of my wrist right now, so I'm holding it up off the mat, and I'm going to kind of gauge it. Okay, this is where I want it to be at, is somewhere around in this area. Now, like I said, I already have 3 rows of netting stitch over here, which I think I have gauged it to where that's all I'm going to need is 3 rows on this side and on this side. So now I'll show you how to do the netting stitch. I still have my thread and needle already attached to this side that I've done the netting stitch, just in case I either have to take out a row or if I have to add a row. I'm kind of doing this part on the fly, so I'm not exactly sure how much of this I'm going to actually need. So let me show you how to do that netting stitch real quick. So this was the working end of the bracelet. This is where I added my last beads and everything. So to get to a point where we can start our netting stitch, we need to close this part of the bracelet off. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up 2 15s. I'm coming out of that first 15 out of the last bead last bead in this row. I'm just going to go straight through the 8-0 that's next in row. So I'm going to end up with 3 15s right there, right after the gemstone. But that's fine. Nobody's ever going to notice that. I'm going to pick up 2 more 15s. I'm going to go through the crystal 8-0 next. And then do the same thing with the gemstone, 2 15s, and go through the gemstone one last time. And then just pull it tight like that. So now I'm going to continue through that first 15 that we had, and then the 2 15s that we just added, and we're going to start our netting stitch on these guys. So coming out of basically that third 15, because we added 2 extra ones on that last little part, I'm going to pick up 3 15s, one of our seed beads, doesn't matter which color, and then 3 15s. And then I'm just going to round through those last 2 15s. So those 2 15s that we added to close off this portion of the bracelet. So I'm going to just round through those 2 15s just like that. Continue through the 8/0 and the next 2 15s. So now I'm sitting right next to the crystal 8/0. I'm going to add 3 15s. I'm going to go ahead and add a crystal 8/0 and hopefully not throw them all over the place. There we go. And then 3 more 15s. And then go back through those 2 15s that we're coming out of at the moment. Continue through the 8/0 if you can. If not, do it in a separate step. And then proceed through those last 2 15s. Doing the same thing, add 3 15s, one of your 8/0s, and 3 15s. Continue through those 2 15s that we're coming out of to make yourself a loop. And then what I do right away is go straight back up through the 3 15s that we just added on this loop. So we came out of those 2 15s down there in the bottom, and then I'm going up the 3 15s that we added on this loop, proceed through the 8/0, so now we're changing directions in our thread, and I'm going to go through the 3 8/0s up here at the top, just to kind of seal that part of the netting stitch. And then go back through that first one again. So that way all 3 of your 8/0s are connected now. So that's the first row of the netting stitch. So now the second row, we're just going to continue on with what we were doing. So I'm coming out of that 8/0 right there. I'm going to go ahead and add 3 15s, an 8/0, and then 3 15s. I'm just adding the crystal one next. Coming out of the 8/0, we're going to go in the same direction as the thread through the 8/0 to put those 7 beads on. Continue through the next crystal that's down on the bottom, or next 8/0, and then we're going to add 3 15s, an 8, and 3 15s. Oh, that 8's kind of small. I want to use that 8. Like that. And then go through, and then proceed through the next 8/0 in line, and do this one more time. 3 15s, an 8, and 3 15s. On this one, go ahead and wrap through that 8/0 again, and then we're going to go back up through those 3 15s on the side that we just added. And then go back through the 8/0 at the top and connect your 3 8/0s. Then that would be 2 rounds done. And I'm doing this the whole time with you to show you anything as far as if I have to change anything up, to let you know that it does happen when you're designing, that you don't always do everything correctly the first time you do it. That's not always, for those of us that design and everything, that's not always the case. Sometimes we do things perfect the first time and it works out great. Then other times we do things and it doesn't work out great at all, and we have to figure out how to fix it. So that's why I'm doing this portion of the video with you the whole time, to let you know that that is always a potential of that happening. Put on this next one, and I'm just kind of picking up random 8/0s. I'm putting on two blue ones and one crystal one each time I go through, but as far as which one gets a crystal and which one gets the blue one, yeah, that doesn't really matter to me. I'm just picking them up. So then now this is the end of the third one. So I'm going to go back through those 3 15s on the side and the 8 in the center, and go ahead and connect on to this 8 on that one, the crystal 8, and then the other blue, and then go back through the first blue. Alright, so now here is the moment of truth. So I'm going to lay that down on the mat again. I'm going to get everything kind of set up. I'm going to try to get it to where my magnet will kind of sit on my wrist, hopefully. And then I'm going to pick this up and put that in that direction right there. I'm going to leave just a little bit of room because I'm going to have a wire guard and a jump ring sitting there. So we're going to have a little bit of room sitting there. And that's going to be kind of where that's at. And then this over here on this side is going to be right about in that area. So I'm kind of doing a little visual as to where it's going to be sitting on my wrist. I'm going to try to pick it up and do that same visual right about in there, and then pick it up and see how loose it is on the other end of my wrist. And so you can see that there's a lot of daylight in between the bracelet and the wrist right there. So I think this is going to work out just fine. So this part is complete. So I'll go ahead and I'll break off. I'll let you finish off those 2 portions right there. Figure out your length that you're needing. Then come back and I'll show you how to add your wire guard and the clasp. Alrighty, so let's get that wire guard on. Now I ended up changing my jump ring out. I did have some round jump rings, a 4mm round jump ring, but they ended up being just slightly too small, so I changed my jump ring out to an oval jump ring. So this is a 4x6. So I'll have that down in the description below. When I put on the clasp on the other side, I always leave it on, in both sections of the clasp on, so that way when I put on the wire guard on this end and I'm attaching the clasp, I make sure that I'm not putting things upside down or backwards or anything like that. That's just a habit that I got myself into, and I just continue to do that. So when I attached the clasp, I realized that that small round jump ring just wasn't going to work out right. So I changed it to an oval one. So let's go ahead and get that wire guard attached. We're coming out of our 8/0 that we ended up with at the end. We're going to pick up our wire guard. Now if you're not familiar with a wire guard is a horseshoe shaped finding like this. You have 2 holes down here in the bottom, and then here along the top you have a little channel to where your thread or your wire would be sitting in. So we're going to go up through one of the sides of the wire guard and then pull that down to the product. I'm going to flip it around so I can go down the other side of the wire guard. And then I pinch the wire guard in my fingers just a little bit, and that just allows the thread to stay into that channel. Helps to kind of guide it into the channel to keep it in there. So there it is. So we're coming out of this blue seed bead. I'm going to jump over and go through the other blue seed bead. So that way the wire guard kind of sits in the center like that. Now I'm going to continue through the first blue seed bead that we were in, that we just came out of. I'm going to go through the crystal seed bead here in the back. And then after I come out of the crystal seed bead, then I'm going to go back through the wire guard a second time. So you want to go back up that channel. And then this is the part that can get a little difficult, but it's really not that hard. You just have to take it slow if you're not familiar with the wire guard. You go down the other side of the channel of the wire guard, and then, like I said, pinch your wire guard in between your two fingers just a little bit, and then help guide that thread to sit in the channel along the top. So now we're going to continue through the crystal bead one more time. I'm going to go through the two blue seed beads. When I go through the second blue seed bead, I'll be coming out next to the wire guard again. I'm going to go through this a third time. So I'm going to try to get up through there again. When I did this on the other side, I ended up having to use my pliers. It might be getting kind of thick, so you may have to grab your pliers just to grab onto your needle. Sometimes that needs to happen. So I've already got that in there. I'm going to go down the other side of the wire guard. And this is where I had to use my pliers, because it was getting kind of hard to grab onto it. And all you do when you have to grab your pliers, just put your needle in between your pliers and just wiggle it through and pull at the same time. And then it helps kind of get everything through the wire guard just the way you need it. So now we're pretty much done. All we have to do is tie off. So I'm going to go down, sitting right next to that blue 8-0. So I'm going to go through there. I'm going to go down the 3 silver seed beads, 15-0s that are sitting there. I'm going to make a knot here, so I'm going to go underneath a bridge thread, make myself a little loop, go through that loop, making sure, and then pull down, making sure that the loop stays in between 2 beads. Then proceed through another bead. And then I'm going to go down these 3 15s that are sitting here. All I'm doing is just weaving back through the product, making knots every once in a while, and I will eventually get myself back down to the bracelet, because I want to make sure that we're doing about 3 to 4 knots and see how that knot, I don't know if you saw that or not, but that knot started to go through the wrong, or in between the wrong 2 beads, because I want to be in between the 15 and the 8, not in between 2 15s. So if that happens, all you have to do is just loosen your knot up, wiggle it around, and then pull down when you get in between the correct 2 beads. So we're going to continue through that 8-0 that's sitting there, and then back down these 3 15s right here, and then I'm just going to tie off, or burn off right here, because I've already made 2 or 3 knots on both ends. So burn off, and then you take your thread burner and make yourself a little ball of thread that will end up hanging out right next to that 15-0, and you can barely see it. So now that part's done. So all we have to do now is just attach the other end of our clasp. So I'm going to open up my jump ring. Like I said, I'm using an oval jump ring on this one. I don't know if this is ever going to focus because the bracelet's sitting there. There we go. So just open it up by twisting it open. I always like to put it through the wire guard first, and then I'm pulling my bracelet around to where the clasp is sitting there, making sure that nothing is all twisted around and everything. And then I'm just going to attach through the whole of the clasp, just like normal when you're adding a jump ring, and then close it up. And And then now we get to try it on and see if my measurements are correct. So let's see if I guessed correctly. And there we go. We have a nice bracelet that is somewhat loose on the wrist. There's a lot of daylight right there, but with the type of bracelet it is, you're going to want something that's a little bit loose like that. So this is exactly what I was hoping for. Alrighty everyone, we did it. We finished our bracelet. This is your Russian spiral stitch as well as a little bit of netting stitch on the ends. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you hit that like button and the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Also hit that notification bell, that way you'll be notified when I come out with new videos and new tutorials. So thanks again everyone, I really appreciate you watching. I will see you in the next video. Y'all have a great day. Bye.